Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vet Chats, where we help veterans share their awesome stories and make the veteran community a better place. I hope you stay tuned to hear how this generation is continuing their service. Also, Vet Chats is now available on Reese Across America Radio. They're played at Mondays at 3 p.m. and Mondays at 9 p.m., Saturdays at 3 p.m. They have a ton of great veteran content. You can find them on the Odyssey app, iHeartRadio, or their website. Hello, everyone. Today, I welcome William Krieger. He is of Veterans Archive, and today we're going to talk about his story and also how he is sharing the powerful stories of other veterans. So welcome, Bill. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I've been really excited to do this. So yeah, thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
Yeah, the roles have changed because usually you're the one doing the interviewing, correct?
That's true. Like I told you earlier, we just got done with a 6-hour interview, so we're ready.
Wow, is that a record now?
That is. Normally it's 45 minutes to 2 hours, somewhere in there is the sweet spot. But this story really warranted the 6 hours, so we're glad that we could do it.
Yes, I agree. Sometimes it takes that long form to really, capture the full story. And it's hard to do it in short clips, even though that's been the trend for a while, the shorter clips. But I'm telling you, there's something about this long form content that you just can't beat. So let's get into your story. How did you end up in the military, and where are you originally from?
So I'm originally from Lansing, Michigan, born and raised in Michigan. And I have a dual military story, actually. So I joined the Navy right out of high school. I'm not afraid to or ashamed to say that a girl broke my heart and moved out east and went to school and dumped me all within about a month's period of time. And I thought, well, I'll show her I'm going to join the military. So I joined the Navy, became a fire controlman. And contrary to popular belief, I didn't fight fires. I actually started them on other people's ships, is what I like to tell my family. So I spent 10 years in the Navy as a computer technician, and then also 4 years as a recruiter before I left the Navy. And then I went to work for the utility company here in Michigan. Shout out to Consumers Energy, the largest utility company in Michigan. Found my forever home basically there, but really missed the military. So I joined the Michigan National Guard in 1999 on Valentine's Day, actually, and served there. I was enlisted for a total of 14 years, went to OCS, got my commission, and became commander of the 144th Military Police Company. Shout out to the Black Hats, because they are still out there if they're listening, and served a tour of duty in Iraq in 2006, 2007, and then retired from the military in 2011 on Memorial Day.
Wow, incredible. Thank you so much for your service for that long period of time. Something I'm really interested in is I'm always curious when people go back to where they're from after they get out, because I did not do that. And I always wondered what it would have been like to go back home and, be around people that I had grown up with. What was the hardest thing for you to go back home after you had this experience of being in the Navy?
When you're in the military and you have that task and purpose every day, when you get out, it's not having that task and purpose every day that can be very, very difficult. It was really finding the right job for me and my family. I was married, I had children, I had a mortgage, so it was important to find the right job. And like many veterans, I found myself bouncing around. I took probably 2 or 3 starter jobs, is what I'll call them, until I landed in the utility industry, which is very much like the military, so it felt like home to me. So that was really the hard part. Some of it too was some of the folks that I had grown up with who had never left and not experienced the things that I had experienced. We just didn't have that connection anymore. But I will tell you that there's a couple of friends that I remember all the way from grade school up till today. We still talk on the phone, we still hang out, we still have a good time. So, but interestingly enough, they had actually joined the military themselves.
Wow. So that bond was kind of rebonded. The childhood bond had been strengthened through the bond of service.
Absolutely.
And I think it's interesting how you were drawn back into the National Guard as well after when you came home. Was it hard for you to switch uniforms from Navy to National Guard?
Well, oh, sorry, my phone just went off.
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay, good. I forgot to turn it off. So yes, and it's a funny question because when I actually joined the Michigan National Guard and went to my first drill weekend. You know what, Jenna? I've totally lost. There we go. I've got you back now. You're going to really hone your editing skills on this one.
Yay, it's a
Let
challenge.
me, gosh, I hate to do this. Let me put this on Do Not Disturb there. We won't get disturbed again. So to answer your question, I went to my first drill weekend and no training, no anything about the Army. And I was given a uniform and I put it on and you know, just thank God my platoon sergeant saw what a soup sandwich I was and came over, showed me how to wear my uniform and really helped me through it because I went from the Navy as an E6, Petty Officer First Class, into the Army National Guard as a staff sergeant. So I didn't lose any rank. And when I showed up, you know, I had a position of responsibility, but I didn't know anything about the Army. So I had a lot of great NCOs around me, non-commissioned officers, that took me under their wing and really helped me out. I remember a guy, Corporal Hogger, is one of those people who immediately saw that I needed help and made sure I didn't look foolish. So it was really difficult. And the Army is so completely different from the Navy that it's the culture and everything else. I had to relearn everything.
Oh, that's interesting, you know, because most civilians, they look at the military as all broad, but then we, as you know, as Navy, we see the stark differences. What was one of those differences that really jumped out at you?
So the one story that I will never forget is I went from computer technician to military police. I had to go to reclassification school, and this was in Minnesota. And so I go to this Army base in Minnesota, Camp Ripley, which isn't there anymore, where the mosquitoes are as big as your head. And it's just a totally different atmosphere. So I get there and I go to this little cabin where I'm going to be staying while I go through reclass school. And it has a dirt floor, like I'm not kidding, a dirt floor. And there's a sergeant first class and a master sergeant, you know, an E7 and an E8. And they're sweeping the dirt floor. And I walk in as an E6 and I'm thinking to myself, the last time I went to a Navy school, it was like a dormitory. We had a pod and we had a little common area. We had a microwave and here we are sweeping a dirt floor in the middle of the woods. And I kind of shared it with these two guys and they started laughing at me like, you are in for a whole different experience, buddy. And so that was kind of the first taste I got.
Wow. I wonder why that is, but something's coming in my mind. I mean, like in the Navy, there's no dirt on a ship, but in the Army, where they're deployed, you know, they're definitely going to have to deal with more environments like that. Is that it, or has their base just not been updated since the 40s?
Well, I jokingly tell everybody I've been to a lot of Army bases, and I think that they find the cheapest plot of land in the crappiest area that they can find. And I don't mean the people in the area; I just mean like the swamp that they tend to build their bases on. So I think that has something to do with it. I think they would rather put the money into the training itself than the facility, and so that's how it worked. But it was definitely a culture shock for me.
That's a great point, because if you think about it, you know, Army, they can train anywhere, but Navy, we have to be in strategic places like San Diego, Norfolk. We got to be on the water.
Pensacola. I can think of all the beautiful places I went to when I was in the Navy.
Yes, Washington.
Yes. Although I did, when I went to OCS, I did go to Fort Lewis in Washington for 2 weeks. And while I spent 2 weeks with everything that I was going to have on my back and walking through the woods, it was absolutely beautiful there.
Oh, and what was that training like? How did you enjoy that?
I really enjoyed it. Like, it was jumping out of the back of helicopters. It was doing just all kinds of survival training. It was really learning leadership in some of the most harshest environments that you can think of. But I would not trade that experience for anything. It was just amazing. And, you know, I didn't go to OCS until I was almost 40. So I had to get a waiver to go, and I was probably one of the oldest dudes there. So at the end of my class, I still have it somewhere. All the guys signed a little cane and gave it to me. So yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. Wow. I mean, so what was your perspective like? Was it harder for you to get in the mindset that you might have seen some of the younger folks in, really drinking that Kool-Aid right away while you were, more mature, you had your frontal lobe developed? How was that for you?
So initially it was very difficult. I remember going to phase 1 of OCS, and I had broken my hand riding BMX bikes, but that's a story for a different day. But I wasn't going to tell anybody because I didn't want to not go to my class. This is my last opportunity. So I show up at phase 2. It's a 2-week program, and my hand is swollen up like a puppet, and I'm down in all kinds of things to make my hand feel better. In about 4 days of this, they treat you just as though you're in basic training again. It's someone in your face yelling at you. You can't do anything right. I just remember standing in line to get food, and there were people there who had washed out of the program, but they still had to complete their 2 weeks. And so they're serving up mashed potatoes and gravy or whatever the food was. I remember thinking to myself for about a hot second that, if I quit now, I could just serve mashed potatoes for the next 2 weeks and be happy about it. And then I thought, there's no way I'm doing that to myself. I'm going to complete this. I think the mindset for me was, it was very hard at first because I'd already been through basic training. I didn't want to do it again. But I also knew that it was kind of what the game was. And so I didn't get into my head like most people who've never been through this before start getting into their own heads. So I think to some extent it gave me an advantage over maybe some of the younger guys that were there, younger guys and gals, actually.
Yes. Yeah, I could see that. And you also know that there's another side to this, that when you get out to the fleet or you get out to what the Army's really like, it's not like this. And I think that would have helped me, because I remember in boot camp, it seemed like there was no end. And I'm like, is the military really like this? This is how it's going to be for the next however many years? So I could see that as an advantage and also a disadvantage, So getting into what you're doing now, which is documenting stories. How did veteran stories become so important to you?
So I will give you what I call the Reader's Digest condensed version of what happened, because it's a long story. But essentially, when I came back from Iraq in 2007, because I was in the National Guard, it was, I remember stepping off the battlefield on October 13th, getting on a plane and coming home. And 2 weeks later, I'm in a car driving from one part of Michigan to where my office is in another part of Michigan. And I parked my car. It was a beautiful fall day. And I got out and I locked the car. And I thought to myself, man, this is going to be a beautiful day. And it wasn't for the reasons that you're probably thinking, right? The birds were chirping, the sun was shining. That was none of the reason why it was going to be a great day. It was going to be a great day because no one shot at me and nothing blew up on my way to work. And my next thought was, I'm crazy. Like, nobody thinks like this. Like, I'm a crazy person. And it just spiraled from there to the point where in mid 2008, I had attempted suicide, and realized in the middle of all of this that I needed to get some help. Thankfully, without getting too graphic, I was getting ready to pull the trigger on a gun when someone called my cell phone. And I thank God every day for that phone call. That person saved my life. And I actually took them to lunch a couple years ago and told them that they had saved my life because I think they needed to hear it. Anyway, so I went and got the help I needed, and I started listening to podcasts, and I really got into NPR. I loved listening to NPR, which I used to joke about my parents always listening to NPR. But I started listening to the Moth Radio Hour, and I hear this story by a lady named Piper Kerman, who wrote Orange is the New Black. And she talks about her time in prison. And I'm just listening to them, just fascinated by this story. And so I subscribe to the podcast, and I find out that the Moth Radio Hour also does what they call story slams. And there was one in my area. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go tell a story. So I go there for several months. I don't get on stage. And finally, after about 5 months, my name gets picked. I get on stage and I tell my story. And it was transformative for me. Like, I felt the love of that audience in sharing my story with them. But also at the end of it, people came up to me and said, gosh, I thought I was the only person that ever felt that way. Like, your stories really helped me. And I thought, this is amazing. So I started doing storytelling of my own, and I shared mostly military stories. And I also shared my story of suicide. And the more I did it, the more I realized this is really helping people out. At the same time, I had been thinking about my grandfather, and this is all going to come together. This is not a disjointed story. I'm not babbling here, but I started thinking about my grandfather, a guy who grew up in Missouri and had this amazing life, and he would tell his stories in only the way a guy with a Missouri accent can tell them. And we talk about him today, but it's not the same as hearing Grandpa tell the story. And I thought, what if there was a way to capture people's stories so that no one ever has to say, gosh, I wish I could hear that in their own voice. And so I thought, well, I could do that for anybody. But who's going to benefit the most from it, and who do I know? And clearly it's veterans. Like, veterans have stories, and they will, if you sit down with them and you're another veteran, they will tell you those stories. You know that because of what you do. And so that was the catalyst to bring it all together. And so the idea is that we capture our history from the heroes that created it in their voices and in their words, so that future generations can listen to this and learn from it. Because what better way to hear about our history than from the people who actually lived it?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And there's so much power in that, in storytelling, and especially with veterans, because we often feel like you may have felt, I'm crazy, I'm the only one who thinks like this, and to hear someone else's story and relate to it and see all those similarities, it's so validating and reassuring. As I know a lot of veterans, it's hard for them to get to that point because we're coming from a culture of walls up, no feelings, no emotions, keep that locked up. How have you found the best way to get a veteran to open up and share their story?
So the first step is that all of our interviewers are veterans. That's just a requirement. You can be the greatest interviewer in the world, but if you're not a veteran, you may not relate to what that person's saying to you. The second thing is to sit down and explain what we do, and not push it. Some veterans are not going to share their stories, and I can respect that. But some will remember the short conversation we have and come back and say, hey, I'm ready to do this now. And it's treating each person like an individual. And it's like treating their story as this living, breathing being, and letting them know that you're going to treat it with care. And also what I have found is that when veterans understand that their stories might help other veterans, they're just more than happy to share their stories. And some of these stories are very, very hard to listen to. So I can only imagine how hard they were to tell.
Yes, that's a great point, because we're so used to a life of service, serving others. So a great way to get veterans to open up is saying, you're going to help someone. This is serving others, and just framing it like that, which is true, will more likely open a veteran up. I've noticed that as well. Through your interviews, I'm curious, what have you learned from, talking with veterans of all generations? How have you seen more similarities between them? And also, what differences have you seen?
It's a great question, because I've interviewed veterans who are 100 years old and served in World War II. And I've interviewed veterans who are in their 20s who just did a short stint in the military. And the one thing I think that we have in common, regardless of your reason for actually joining the military, is this underlying feeling of service to others, whether you know it at the time or not, right? I mean, I joined the military because my girlfriend broke up with me and I didn't have money to go to college. But at the end, I stayed for 21 years because that feeling of serving others, there's just nothing like it. And whether you've served for 2 years or 40 years, I think that that's a common thread throughout. And one of the things I've learned too is that, as different as we'd like to think that we are, we're the same in a lot of respects. And especially with veterans, if we can find that common thread, the conversation just flows naturally, and that bond and that friendship is there. But I have learned that not all veterans are the same. Not all veterans want to share their stories. And some folks are very happy with their service, and some folks are bitter about their service, and there's everything in between. So the differences are huge. There's lots of them, but so are the similarities.
Yes, yeah, I could see that. Something that I've noticed maybe with talking with the older generation is they seem a little more, it takes them a little longer to get warmed up or to, find value in their own stories, whereas younger generations, we're more used to that. We're more open to mental health and talking about that. That's only one key difference, but so so by doing this Veteran Archives, could you explain real quick what exactly is Veteran Archives?
So Veterans Archives, I'll just get a plug in for our website, www.veteransarchives.org. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We record and preserve veteran stories. We never charge the veteran a penny for it. It's always free to the veteran. The veteran will get a copy of their story on a memory card in a really nice display box. I found a local guy who does woodworking, and so these are all handmade walnut boxes. They're beautiful. And one of our challenge coins will go in the top of that box. So we provide them with that, but then we also keep a copy to archive it. And we're currently working with some different agencies to create a searchable database so that as we record the stories, they can go into this database and people can search on name or unit or time period or what war was going on. All of those things will become searchable. Right now, we do have a podcast, Veterans Archives. It's available anywhere. And so as we capture these stories, we will put them out on the podcast, always checking with the veteran first to make sure that they're okay with that, of course. But the understanding is that the stories will get shared through the archive. So everyone's aware of that right up front. So that's really what we do. We go to different organizations, we go to different events, and then we find veterans who are wanting to share their stories, and we sit down with them. Everything's portable, so I can go to their home. I've recorded stories through Zoom and other media. So it really just depends on where the veteran's at and how they would like to do this. So it can be in person, it can be online. I actually did one interview over the phone. We do audio only, simply because video takes a lot more space and there's a lot more involved in editing video. So there are organizations that do video recordings like that, and we all just want to mutually support each other.
Yes, yeah, that is incredible, and I can imagine. So I think a few stories may come to mind when I asked you this question, but what are some that stand out when stories of them receiving that box, or maybe the family member's reaction of getting that recording?
Well, there's one that really sticks out in my mind, and I met this guy purely by accident, and his father-in-law had served in Vietnam. And his father-in-law had recently opened up about his service. So he hadn't talked about it for all of these years, but it was bothering him. And someone came to him and said, look, you need to go talk to somebody, and it's really going to help you. And so he did. He went to the VA and he talked to them, but then he called me and said, I want to share this story with other people. And we sat down. I went to his house, and anyone who knows me knows that I don't drink. I'm a devout non-drinker. But I sat down with this guy, and he wanted to have a beer with me. And I'm like, I'll have a beer with you. Let's just talk veteran to veteran. And we recorded his story in his living room and on his comfy couch. We both had a beer, and he really talked about some things that you could tell had bothered him. They were very personal. And some of it made me scratch my head, like, what would I have done if I had been in that situation? And he just laid it all out there and shared it. So we did his recording. I sent him his display box, and didn't really hear from him. Like, we chat on Facebook once in a while, and we're good friends, but we haven't really seen each other in a while. So I get a DM from his daughter, and I didn't know who she was. And she said, "Hey, I just want to thank you." And so I figured out who she was, and basically what she said was that her and the family were so thankful to have this recording of her father because it's his voice, and his voice is unique. But he talked about things with me that he hadn't talked about with anyone. And so they get to see a whole picture of their father now, and then when he's gone, they'll still have that with them. And so it was just so meaningful to her that it really kind of choked me up. It was, you wonder when you do things if it even matters, and to find out that it matters, I call that your "It's a Wonderful Life" moment, when you find out how you've impacted others. And that was one area where not only had I positively impacted the guy who told me his story, but his whole family benefits from that too.
Yes, that is beautiful. And I can imagine the family maybe have felt more grace and understanding of their father, brother, whoever heard it, because you're hearing that full story. I know the first time I heard my great grandpa's full story, it helped me understand why my grandma was the way she was, and it just it affects those around you, and just to have that more understanding is such a gift that you are giving families, and I think that's so important. So now, on a more personal level, you kind of mentioned that this has given you a new purpose. How has it helped you maybe tell your own story?
As I hear people tell their stories, it will bring up things that I had forgotten, maybe forgotten on purpose. But it's really shaped how I look at my past. Now, interestingly enough, I have not recorded my own story, and the reason is because my son is also a military veteran. He served in the Army for 6 years. He was in the infantry, and he also does recordings for us, and he's not recorded his story. So our agreement is that we will record each other's stories. Because not only do we have that father-son bond, but we have this other bond from our time in the military I just can't explain it. We just get each other, and sometimes we'll just call and tell a joke or something that most people would kind of cringe at, but it's a military thing, and we understand it. So I think through all of this, I understand the importance of not just telling the story, but telling it the right way for me. And so when I do record my own story, which will be very soon, I think it'll be complete. And that's thanks to the people that have come before and recorded their stories. That's not to say I haven't told my story, because I do a lot of storytelling, but I haven't sat down and done this yet. I've just been waiting for that right moment. And it's very, very soon it'll be here.
That is going to be so special, because I believe as you both are talking, you're going to find things that you didn't know about one another, or stories that you still haven't heard. So that is going to be really cool. I'm looking forward to hearing that in the future. And speaking of future, what do you have planned next for Veteran Archives? Or, what is your next intention, or planning on expanding anything?
Yeah, so last year was really our startup year. So it was getting all the equipment, contracting with the right people, doing all of those things up front. We still managed to get about 50 stories recorded, which is no minor feat. But this year going forward, we want to try and get at least 100 veteran stories recorded and out to the veterans and into the archive. That's really our goal. And so we have the folks in place to do the recordings. We are working with veterans to do that. And we are fundraising in order to pay for that, because it's not free. I will tell you that I have funded this mostly out of my own pocket, but it's been a labor of love. But as we get larger and as we do more of these, that's going to be important. We've expanded our website. We now have the podcast, which we just started in January. We do have a YouTube channel, but I'm still trying to figure out how I want to use that. But I'll get there. We have a great social media team that puts all our posts out across our different social media. We're working together. It won't be a secret that we're collaborating and sharing stories across our platforms. which in military speak, we call that a force multiplier. So I'm really excited about that. We are looking at some great corporate and local sponsorships that are coming up. And this year we'll be sponsoring a golf outing to bring awareness to veteran stories, working with some local producers to do some live storytelling. So lots of exciting things coming up. I would urge people to check out the website to get the latest news. You'll see my email on there. You can email me anytime. I'll answer your questions. So we're excited about this not being necessarily a building year now, but this being a we're up and running year. So I'm excited to see what that brings.
Yes, big things happening, and I can just imagine all of the lives you're about to touch, and the families of those. It's very exciting, and I was put in touch with you by my aunt. So I have to shout out my Aunt Cassie for introducing me to Bill and making this possible. So, Bill, thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything else I could help you share today?
No, again, thank you for having me on. Thank you for helping spread the word about Veterans Archives. And I look forward to talking with some of your listeners, as well as talking with you in the near future.
Yes, absolutely. So everyone, in case you didn't hear, it's Veterans Archives. You can look them up. They're on Instagram, everywhere. Be sure to give them a follow and reach out to Bill if you have any ideas, or maybe this sparked something in you about sharing your story. So again, thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you.